the slip. The slip is a murky area for people who have addictions. Firstly, I want to talk about the accident, because as we know, sometimes accidents can happen. So for an example, you could be at a gathering with friends and you pick up a drink and you take the first swig and you go, oh, there's alcohol in it, and you put it down. That's an accident. Or it could be that actually you ask a friend if you can check your email on their computer. And you go to the computer, you wake it up, and there are some inappropriate pictures of men and women. And you walk away from the computer. That's an accident. When these accidents happen, what can actually happen is that we climb up to the top of the tree and we're flailing around in the branches and we're terrified and we're flailing around. And what we need to do is climb back down the tree and ground ourselves at the base. And this is when we really need to work our recovery program. This is when we need to begin to use the tools. And we can use the tool of the 3-minute breathing space. If that feels overwhelming, using the tool of taking one breath in and out and becoming aware of the body. And when you become aware of the body, you will be able to use the next tool of turning towards the internal barometer, turning towards the feeling tone, and noticing that you really are at risk and that you just need to pause and stop. But what can actually happen is the slip after an accident. So you took that drink and you had that first swig and you realise that there's alcohol in it, but because you were unable to ground yourself, unable to take that breath, unable to turn towards your feeling tone, that internal barometer, what happens is these mediating thoughts arise. Oh, well, I may as well just finish the glass. You know, I've wrecked it now. I've had one swig. I've destroyed my abstinence. I may as well just drink the whole glass or the whole can. Or you may go to that computer and you wake it up and you see these inappropriate images, and instead of walking away from the computer, you start to surf the internet and you start going on pornographic websites. This is the slip. And a slip could be 1 minute, it could be 1 hour, it could be 1 day. And again, if the slip arises, it's another opportunity to use the tools of the breath, the tools of coming back to your body, the tools of recognizing your internal barometer, becoming aware of those automatic judgments, those automatic thoughts, the noise, the chatter arising in the heart mind. The problem is with the slip that people can begin to delude themselves. They have a slip and they get back on track, which is excellent. But a month later, 2 months later, they have another slip. And then maybe a year later, they have another slip. And the problem is that these slips can become accumulative. And what can happen is you have slip after slip, and these slips end up into a relapse. And a relapse can last for a week. It can last for a year. A relapse can actually last for 10 years, 20 years. I've met people who have been in a relapse for 20 years. Again, if you're in that relapse, you have to try and use those tools, but it can be incredibly difficult once you're in a relapse to begin using those tools, which is why, again, turning towards the internal barometer is really important, because we may recognize the emotional relapse. We may recognize the mental relapse before we fall into the physical relapse. Often people think, how did I end up in this relapse? I was doing everything to stay abstinent, and they justify the slip they had a year ago. But the reason why they've ended up in this relapse is because they did not pay attention to the mental and emotional relapse. They didn't pay attention to their internal barometer, to their feeling tone. They had lost sobriety of mind. They didn't pay attention to the fact that they were beginning to isolate. They didn't pay attention to the fact that they had stopped eating 3 meals a day. They didn't pay attention to the fact that they were shortchanging themselves on sleep. When we don't eat properly, when we don't give ourselves enough rest, when we begin to isolate, when we don't ask for help, we can be at risk of relapsing. You may have heard of the acronym HALT. H, are you hungry? A, are you angry? L, are you lonely? T, are you tired? If you recognize you're hungry, then perhaps feed yourself. I know that when I'm hungry, I'm at risk of binging on sugar. I know that if I'm angry, I'm at risk of having a downer, negative mental states. I know that if I'm lonely, I'm at risk of reaching for my distractions. I know if I'm tired, that's a big one. If I'm tired, it can knock everything out of sync. This is part of my internal barometer telling me that I'm at risk of losing my sobriety. I'm at risk of having a slip. I'm at risk of relapsing.